Just start. Okay. Okay, everybody. Is everybody here? So, good morning, everybody here in the lecture hall at the Burren College of Art, and those of you who are joining us on Zoom this morning for our annual practice-based PhD seminar or symposium, which takes place as part of the annual exhibition that's happening at the moment in the gallery this year it's entitled Hedges, running from January the 27th to February the 25th. The exhibition and the symposium today includes Chen, Ling Liu, Katarina Gribkoff, Robbie Lawrence and Kate Collyer, who are all giving presentations on their practice this morning. And Joe Hendel, of course. Sorry, Joe. So this symposium takes the form of a PhD style presentations by the students, which is 20 slides, 20 seconds each. And we're also joined today by Dr. L Putnam as a discussant who will be responding to the presentations. Originally from the United States, Dr. L Putnam is an internationally recognized digital artist. She works with performance and digital technologies, focusing on borders and entanglements of gesture, particularly the interplay of the corporeal and the mechanic. Her writing and research focuses on philosophies of technology, digital culture, continental aesthetic philosophy, performance studies, and gender theory. She actively presents her research, artworks, and performances in the United States and Europe, is a committee member of Be Beyond Belfast, and has been a member of the Boston-based Mobius Artist Group since 2009. So I'd like to first, before we kick off the presentations, just hand you over briefly to our Dean, Conor McGrady, who's going to give a short overview of the PhD programme here at Burren College of Art.
Thanks, Sonia. Can I take my mask off for this? Is that allowed?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so you're very welcome, everybody. And we have a few people on Zoom. Can't really hard to see how many exactly, but thanks for joining, those of you on Zoom and those of you here in the lecture hall. And special thanks to Elle for joining us. Hi, Elle. And we still communicate digitally, but we'll get to chat in person one of these days. So you're very welcome, and they're looking forward to a productive discussion. So very briefly, I'm not going to delay you, but just to give you a sense, the PhD program at Burren College of Art has been running for over 10 years. We have, at the moment, we have 9 students involved in the PhD program, engaged at the doctoral level with a range of research projects. Essentially, what the PhD program does is it provides students with training in how to carry out research in the context of the studio. So the emphasis is on practice-based research. Can you hear me? Sorry, what was that? So the emphasis is on carrying out research through artistic practice. And when we talk about research, the focus for the PhD is for students to take on a single focused, dedicated research project that they work on full-time in the studio, or an expanded definition or the expanded sense of the studio, for 4 years and 6 years part-time. And with the standard PhD across other disciplines, the goal is to make an original contribution to new knowledge, to expand the field and how we think about the field and how we understand the field. So bringing new knowledge, new understanding to the field of artistic practice. So just on a separate note, this year we've also just launched a new MPhil degree. And the MPhil is a master's in philosophy, and that was for students who are interested in dedicated, concentrated periods of research. The MPhil provides a pathway into the PhD as well. So we're delighted we're able to offer these 2 research-based programs here at the Burren College of Art. So that's quite enough for me, but I just want to say thank you to Anya for organizing and chairing this today. Thank you again to Elle for being our discussant, and thanks to our participants, and we look forward to productive discussions. So I'll leave it at that.
So to kick off the presentations, I would like to hand over to Joe Hendel, who I unfortunately forgot his name. So
now how do I turn on this presentation here? I just click on this. Okay. Hi, everyone. Okay.
yes.
So is it going to show up on this when I press play?
Just press play.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. Hi, my name is Joseph Hendel. I'm a second-year PhD student from New York, and my presentation is on my research into android masculinity, an inquiry into the psyche and soma of the post-human, digitally embedded and decentralized male. All the images you'll see are from my recent work collaborating with AI, which I'll talk about more later in my presentation. So my research seeks to address several questions. What is masculinity in a post-human context? How does our current technological embeddedness affect masculine feelings of order and control? How does the weakening of male hegemony impact men in the digital age? And what does an engaged, creative techno-masculinity look like, feel like, and what can it produce? My research sits at the intersection of three relatively recent academic and technical fields: posthumanism, which I think started its first journal as recently as 2017, men's studies, which began in the 70s and 80s and continues today, and cybernetics, which began shortly after World War II and whose several waves continued up into the 90s and still has important resonances today. From the post-humanities, we learned that the concept of human being is a historically and discursively determined category, and as such, it can't be taken for granted as the only position from which to view the world. Moving beyond anthropocentric thinking allows us to ask questions about ourselves and our world without privileging traditional categories elevated by humanist binaries. Through post-human thinking, binaries like culture, nature, and man-machine can be partially overcome by reframing our understanding about who we are and how we exist on the planet. Following Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto, posthumanism dispenses with mythic origin stories for humankind, preferring to see our species as directly situated in the present, forced to engage in life materially in the here and now. Masculinity research was partially made possible by this post-human turn. Men were no longer seen as the given universal human and therefore became worthy of direct critical study. Concepts like hegemonic masculinity, toxic masculinity, and inclusive masculinity were developed in order to understand the way men see themselves and interact with society. Men's studies are vital today as traditional hegemonic masculinity breaks down into a new, less patriarchal social terrain, which affords greater equality to those who are normative men. Men's issues relate to self-esteem, sexuality, labor, violence, political power, and all of these are influenced by digital communication and new economic realities. The word cybernetics comes from the Greek word kybernetike, meaning governance, and its roots relate to the steering of a ship. To cyber is to control, to man the steering wheel. And cybernetics is the science of control in complex systems, systems like the cell, the organism, the social systems, machines, computers, ecosystems. Cybernetics happens in real time. Actions are taken in response to the environment in a feedback process, and information is exchanged to trigger real-world outcomes. Though the term is less used frequently today, cybernetic methods underpin all of our computer, military, and financial systems, and its vocabulary and ideas have drastically reshaped our subjectivities. For me, these three fields come together in the figure of the android, a post-human, digitally connected man-machine operating according to cybernetic principles. Where the human has essence, the android has patterns. Where the human has a soul, the android has a program. And where the human has an Oedipal mediated relationship with the world, the android experiences unmediated psychophysical intensities. Like a man, an android is only as good as his inputs, outputs, and environment. He needs good art, food, positive relationships. We should give him good programming as a society, good role models, and he should regularly practice android yoga and avoid the pitfalls of I think, therefore I am, and egoism. So he should self-program for improvement. The android is my speculative, multivalent cyber male limit case. By positing him, I can better see where human males fail to integrate into a digital world. By sketching out the android mind and body, I can perhaps discover where masculine psychologies, behaviors, and social programming hold men back from relating to the world in healthy ways. In Android Self-Portraits 1 and 2, I cast myself as a cybernetic steersman in the center of a blank document and I begin. I assemble in collage, improvising in a flow state with my AI-generated materials at hand. I control my chaotic surroundings with my mouse and microphone, gaining power with the anticipation of a job well done. The QR codes in the collages point the viewer to real-world digital conversations about mastery and self-mastery through technical means, often mundane and silly ones. And what I lose in control by pointing the viewer away from the artwork, I gain in control by making connections between my art and the world. I allow the flow of information to happen just as I flow while I work. By working in collaboration with a non-human artificial neural net brain, I release even more control in the art-making process. The image model that I typically work with takes text and numerical input from me, and perhaps a starting image. Then I steer the inputs over multiple generations to produce results that arouse my psychophysical intensities. In artificial male projections, I display 9 images of body technology chimeras. By focusing on flesh and metal merging, I present masculine fears of dissolved boundaries and overturned binaries. I steer the AI towards images of speculums to arouse male psychic fears around the vagina and to bring our interconnectedness with technology back to moments even before birth. In my video piece, Artificial Man Intelligence, created for the Exponential Theater Festival in Brooklyn, I used AI-generated images and text to create a collage of online masculinities, seeding my text generators with posts from male-centric Reddit boards like Men's Rights, Bro Pill, Confronting Chaos, and Circumcision Grief. By having actors perform this AI text with its strange, uncanny grammar and tact, I highlight the alienated nature of language itself, seeing it as a collection of mind reprogramming memes instead of the human picture of language as some sort of enchanted birthright of humanity. To the limit case android, language is one tool of many and not a sign of indelible humanness. In one scene, a triune one-breasted goddess appears, speaking AI text from the non-duality Reddit board to a collection of men who are all bemoaning the loss of their foreskins. The men stand without mouths, backs against the wall, castrated. An AI dog teases them and us with its ability to speak without using words. In conclusion, through digital collage, video, performance, and AI, my project examines contemporary masculinity from a post-humanist perspective. It sees the mind and body as a single cybernetic system which can be healed and improved, and it posits the android as a speculative limit case for a male subjectivity which can lead to greater harmony and social integration. Thank you. And now I'd like to bring up Katarina Gribkoff for the next presentation.
So I'm trying to see where I am in relation to the screen.
Just hit play.
Yep.
Come up
Okay,
on the main screen.
yeah. So just before I hit play, I didn't have an extra slide to fit this in, but my name is Katerina Gribkoff, and I'm also from the United States, and I'm in my second year in the PhD program. The question guiding my practice-based research is, in what ways may the principles of permaculture guide the inputs, outputs, and organization of an art-making system that sits between studio and garden? This project will see the development of a dye and fiber garden in studio practice that grows from, supports, and feeds back into a garden plot. I am using the philosophy of permaculture, a holistic systems theory derived from observations and interactions with complex living systems, to design a new system of making and moving as an artist. I will be combining principles and practices of permaculture with themes found in contemporary eco-critical art and theory, like moving away from anthropocentric thinking, fostering interconnection and complexity, understanding material agency as in the philosophies of new and eco-materialisms, and embracing the new optimistic and regenerative turn of contemporary land art. Material was the impetus for and is a continued focus of my hybridized studio garden PhD project. Material creation and play are ways of building human nature connectedness. This represents what systems theorist Donella Meadows would call a potential leverage point in our dominant systems of linear, wasteful, extractive material encounters. In pursuit of a new way of making and moving or practicing as an artist, I focused on 3 discoveries made this past academic year regarding the characteristics of my methodology. 1, the importance of human-to-human connection. 2, the imperfect realities of collection and selection of materials. And 3, the nature of working collaboratively with plants. While centering human nature connectedness in my project, I was surprised to discover the importance of human-to-human connection in building a complex network of references and sources, aiding in material collection and plant growth. And then the next few slides, the red text are permaculture principles. Beginning with the permaculture design course I completed last summer, I've been amassing an index of friendly faces and knowledgeable growers and makers. This has proved useful when, for example, dealing with an unknown and troublesome pest. Friends helped me to identify the nearly invisible spider mites plaguing my madder plant's leaves. I was able to eliminate the problem with a natural solution of neem-soaked bark mulched over the soil. On top of that, I used bits of dyed wool to then surround new madder shoots coming up through the soil to better keep an eye on their growth. When looking for bamboo to support my growing madder plant, through new connections made, I was able to source unwanted shoots that had previously overrun a garden, avoiding having to plant my own and risking invasion. I then dried and sanded the bamboo, using it to support the madder runners. Through other connections made, I have gone on a series of site visits to farms and gardens around Ireland. This has contributed to a better understanding of the practical and imperfect realities of material collection and use in systems of growing, which was my second discovery of this year. Farmers and gardeners I've met use a mixture of local, abundant, and available sources. This creates interesting relationships between farmer, plants, and material, or the human, non-human, and non-living. This series of site visits sparked a series of film photographs that capture these relationships. The photographs and site visits then inform my sculptural practice as I explore ways of working with plants. This photograph shows strawberries in plastic pipes the grower had found abandoned by the road. The shape and nature of the material changes the relationship between human and plant, complicating the desire to irrigate and forcing the grower to move slowly, but allowing time for close, individualized attention. With this pipe sculpture, I tested the method of growing, but on a smaller scale, using beach-found plastic tubes plugged with homemade cob, filled with expired sprouting seeds, rescued from yet another connections cupboard. Finally, my third discovery of this academic year has been the nature of working in collaboration with plants in a slow and reactive way, specifically with the dye plants growing in my studio. This way of moving is made possible through close observation and small interventions. In caring for and collaborating with plants, I employ what contemporary theorist Maria Puig de la Bella Casa calls speculative ethics, or what I call educated improvisations. I use knowledge gained from other growers and the plants themselves, again through observation and interplay, to dictate actions taken in the studio. With madder plants like those in this work currently on view in the gallery, the roots hold the colorful compounds needed for dyeing. To care for this hidden part of the plant, I constructed a madder dyed cotton cover stuffed with paper and wool, playing with the tradition of wool used as mulch and warming cover in garden spaces. To collaborate with living plants means aligning temporalities between myself and the plant, matching its pace of growth and understanding its needs and yields. Madder takes at least 2 years to establish strong roots for dyeing, allowing time to play with and care for the long and clingy climbers above the soil. This fact spurred the creation of a structure placed around the planter to support the growing shoots with bamboo and hand-spun wool, also dyed with madder. The entire structure sits atop wheels to easily adjust to the changing position of the sun in the sky as it filters through the studio windows. In learning the importance of aligning temporalities between my work as an artist and the cycle of seasons and growth, I am preparing for weeks of outdoor labor in the garden after months of observations and interactions. And this season, I am also working closely with a local national school on a polytunnel project in which 1/3 of the tunnel is devoted to inks and dye plants. Through this work with local children, I hope to spread human-nature connectedness and encourage a greater understanding of the potential artistic power of plants. Thank you so much for listening. I think I have a closing slide that's going to come up in a second, but I can't. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, and then all quotes are from Toby Hemingway's Gaia's Garden, A Guide to Home Skill Permaculture. Thank you. Yep, so next up is Robbie Lawrence.
It's opening.
Good morning, I'm Robbie Lawrence, and I will be presenting on work in progress shown in Li Ba. This project is an inquiry into painting as a means of understanding the presence of existential death anxiety and social norms by providing a secular space for critical reflection on the relationship of death, dying, and the dead body. Historical and philosophical thought and behavior in response to death is a primary influence in this project, resulting in practice-based research that engages with turn-of-the-century painting style as an extension of persisting late Victorian thought, meaning these paintings aim to use in order to analyze this methodology of layering, mimicry with curated intent, and finish-driven result. Blanchot contemplates the psychic confusion of the cadaver. This deceased is no longer of this world. He has left it behind, but behind there is this cadaver, which is not of the world either, even though it is here. Painting that uses optic mimicry presents to the eye as physically present by optical illusion, situated in roles of nature, as it is optically real, but cannot exist. The work might impress the importance of recognizing conflicting psychic imagery, like that which is found in the cadaver. Paint possesses a tactility and retinal capability that has made it a long-use medium with a variety of methods of use. The retinal, almost deceitful nature of paint might be ideal for exploring the tangible but unknowable nature of death. The first approach to the project began with memento mori-like objects that signified the illness and death of my father, William G. Lawrence, who died in 2008. The tumor responsible was located behind William's right eye, as represented in glioblastoma, and some of his remains are featured in a body in ashes. There is a critical difference between these paintings and the Dutch memento mori. Mine are metaphorical, about a specific death. The memento mori was created formulaically as a reminder of Calvinist morality. Thematically, both include death signifiers and have some coinciding formal qualities, but ultimately do little to evoke reflection on one's own existential death anxiety. In an attempt to discover contemporary signifiers of denial of death, more experimental setups were lived with and some painted. Reading on food preservation and funerary practices informed potential subjects for future still life. Aesthetic similarities with embalming and salt wax preservation of meat were visually intriguing, while the heart as a void also became a potential subject. Engaging with philosophical and psychoanalytic writings on psychology also informed visual experiments in regards to the void, leading into the contemplation of the impossibilities paint presents. For example, the living eyes on a cooked lobster by Kolf, or the cast rendered with convincing form next to flat shadows that reads as both real and unreal. Gray form as an impossibility became the compelling technique for future paintings for two reasons. One being the engrais method used in historical painting until the turn of the century. Engrais was believed to resolve value and form before color was considered, as color might hide the physical nature of the subject being painted. To paint in engrais is to form an illusory painting perspective, to strip away distraction and understand the subject's surface interaction with light and mass in a physical space. Secondly, engrais in the context of commonly understood historical painting is incomplete, in between the empty canvas and final product. This discovery led to a multi-pronged method engaged with the material to develop an understanding of these materials of preservation, funerary practices, and decay in a physical sense, and subsequently apply that knowledge to the studio process. Working with these led to the creation of experimental sculptures that might be painted in the engrais method. There are elemental aspects to the experimental sculptures: wax, marble dust, and salt as preservers, time and light as force that affects the body in decay, and cloth as the receiver and deliverer of life and death. In tandem with this practice-based research, philosophical and historical writings on death terror are consulted to further understand the effects socially. These prongs of research inform the painting both as a noun and a verb, how the paint is applied, the color palette used, and the size and composition of the image, and finally, how it is hung. Each of these decisions are put into effect to be disseminated by the viewer and to provide depth of understanding for the painter as the image is being created. to focus on the ubiquitous death instead of related trauma or exceptional death. This expansion on formal elements of still life moves away from the everyday object or scene that might signify the act of dying or the deceased. Instead, elements of anonymity and universality of the body are reinterpreted as still life. In addition, the physical positioning of the life-size paintings at the feet of the viewer are used to communicate the viewer's reflective role in relation to the painting. However, the nature of painting being one of discovery, as we observe and interact with the subject for an extended amount of time, inherently removes certain elements of control, which allows for instinctive and reactionary spontaneity to the subject in order to develop the work, a hallmark of creative practice. This method of painting, informed by theory, creates a neutral double of an existing object. It uses void and illusory form to question whether or not the illusion is forming or disintegrating. The Waiting Shroud series presented in Li Ba might ask, what is my form's relationship to the void? The canvases stand at 2 meters high, comfortably containing a diversely sized shrouds within. A consistent canvas size throughout a series of painting might show a sense of purposeful repeated study. The physical presence of the painting, i.e. its presentation and creation on the floor, is significant in challenging passive absorption of the painting. This body of work situates itself among other critically engaged contemporary artwork, ideally figurative and representational paintings that approach death as a subject in some way. In specific terms, this field addresses the ubiquitous death and the void as it relates to death terror and is critically addressed in a secular way. These paintings seek to expand the psychoanalytic theory of middle knowledge, a state hovering between complete acceptance and repudiation of the imminence of death. They will explore the image in both a psychological and retinal way, visually building with 2 versions of the imaginary by Maurice Blanchot and psychiatric research on clinical disorders and related theory. If successful, this project will contribute repositioned still life painting that focuses specifically on the quotidian death and provides a space to critically think on the relationship with the fear of death, dying, and the dead body. Thank you for your time this morning, and should you have the opportunity to consult one of the paintings, please let me know of your experience. The show. And up next is Ling Liu. I don't know where your presentation is.
Hi, morning. My name is Ling. This is my 2nd year of PhD here. The title of my work in this exhibition, Li Ba, is Hearing Rhythm, Seeing Rhythm. Instead of going directly into my research, I would like to start today's talk with a quote. Chinese and the Western histories run in parallel before the 20th century. China has a totally different system of culture, language, aesthetics, and society. So please bear this in mind for the next 6 minutes. So my research question is acoustic layers. How are the traditional rules of rhythm in Chinese aesthetics applied across contemporary creative practices via sound and visual? So the next would be like the general look of the research structure up to this point of my practice. What I'm doing is basically dealing with the questions like, what are rules of rhythm in Chinese aesthetics? Why are they matter? And how to relate them to my practice. So last year, with my installation work Echoed, I used poetry, calligraphy, and Chinese characters to make sound, visual, and interactive works in order to deal with the question, what are rules of rhythm? Trying to show them with my artistic experiments. So this year, I started with another question, why rules of rhythm matter? Why they matter in the history and why they still matter now? Why don't we just like break the rules and the rules are meant to be broken? So with all these questions in mind, I started my research with sound. I wanted to show the rhythm first, not the general one, but the particular rhymes within the sound, not the context, but just the sound. So I did my experimental piece based on an old poem. With this piece, I tried to break the sentences down and just focus on the end rhymes, playing with the repetition of the end rhymes from 3 end rhymes towards the end with only the last rhyme left. So the next up, this is the sound design. The repetition of the rhymes is a key in this work. The idea is to repeat the rhymes to a certain point, so the word would lose meaning. There's no more context, and all that matters is the sound and the form. So the only thing left is the rhythm. With the editing window here, you can see like the sound piece started with the entire poem, then the rhyme started to be repeated more and more. The pace speeded up towards the end, and by this point, the repeating voice is intense, and the words became sound patterns. So with the rhymes shown, my next experiment is to break down the rhymes within the characters. In this way, I break the rules down completely. What I wanted to find out is if the poems or lyrics can still exist without rules of rhythm. Then what are the rules? So the rhyme terms can be divided into 2 categories, ping and ze. So in the singing process, ping tone is up and rising, ze tone is down and entering. So at the same time, ping is long, ze is short. So this sets the basic flow of the poem, like with this in mind. And the relationship between rhymes, words, and Chinese characters is that the rhymes in characters, words are combined by several characters. So taking any part of the voice out, the rules are broken. The rhythm started to be disassembled. In this particular sound piece, I broke the ping and ze tones down and take them out bit by bit in the process. Eventually, there will be only a bit of ping rhymes left. So the singing of the lyric would be gradually disassembled in the process. And with all this in mind, I finished the sound design. In this work, within the process of breaking down rhymes, for the listeners, it is a process of a lyric being shattered into pieces, and the lyric no longer exists. All you hear is nonsense. So the other big topic in my research project is the connection between sound and visual. Can we visualize the rhythm we heard? Last year, I worked with calligraphy, trying to write the sound I heard. And this year, I'm experimenting with Chinese painting. So there are 2 works in the show. The first one is Paint Rhythm 1. It is an attempt to represent the singing of poetry in real time, a form of performed visual transcription using Chinese painting as visual representation to the rhythmic vocal patterns in the sound. This video shows the process of drawing the sound patterns while listening to the sound work. I created the Chinese landscape paintings with only the sound patterns, rhythmic voice I heard, discarding the context of the lyric. So the second work, Paint the Rhythm 2, continues the experiment of the first work. They are a kind of rhythmic landscape of the accumulation of painted sonic gestures. So they are all slightly different, since the feeling of the listening and the movement of the gestures are all different each time. The series of paintings are presented as a column from the ceiling to the floor in the gallery, which represents the repetition of the rhythmic patterns visually. With both the sound and the visual works, I ask the question once again, why rules of rhythm matter? Thank you. So one last thing, I will leave some of the questionnaires for the sound works in the gallery. So please collect them and fill them out after you experience the sound works. I will leave a kind of a small task by the work to collect them, and I will leave some new ones for the ones not here in person today. So thank you so much.
So can you hand over now to Chen?
Okay, yeah. Next up is Chen, and
Chi, are you with us?
are you ready?
Yeah. But I just you just click the play button. So I will mute myself and click on the screen. My name is Chen, and this is the third year of my PhD. I will make this presentation in 3 parts. First, the reason why I made this project. Second, what I have done at this stage. My name is Chen, and this is the third year of my PhD. I will make this presentation in 3 parts. First, the reason why I made this project. Second, what I have done at this stage. Third, what I hope to achieve and the contribution to the new knowledge. My research question is an inquiry into the ability of portrait painting and documentary video to challenge subjective boundaries. I want to combine portraiture and documentary video with the use of the VR technology to complete my project. The reason I started this project was a personal experience. The driving force behind my continued exploration is the division and confrontations that still persist in the world today. My grandma's little brother has been sold to Taiwan to be a soldier in 1945, and all his relatives thought he was died somewhere. Until 1994, his son found my grandma. He said this is his father's will when he died in Taiwan in 1970s. That was the first time I felt how powerful the damage of war is to ordinary families. In 2013, when I went to visit my relatives in Taiwan, I saw that there were many veterans still alive there. So I started to draw them and write down their stories. After the project of veterans in Taiwan, I have completed portraits of Muslim in Xinjiang, Scottish in the UK, Lhasa people in the Tibet, and Irish immigrants. Those people has captured my interest in constant exploration. Initially, I had looked at the certain history with some emotional narrowness, but as I learned more about different ideologies and individual life, I gradually saw the smallness and the powerlessness of the self, which is myself and every individual life in the world. Behind every event, every ideology, every belief, every sermon, even every emotion, there is a construct of individual beings and their thinking. They can be mutually agreeable and confrontational. The most cruel result of all conflicts is the destruction of lives, and the Second World War was the largest war so far in the world. It ended in 1945 with the last battle started by the Japanese army in China, which took place in the Huaihua area of Hunan province. In 2021, I returned to veterans again, drawing on veterans from the Huaihua area where Japan surrendered, conducting in-depth interviews and documenting them. Also, I draw about 26 veterans' portraits. Most of the veterans who were at this area, who took part in the battle and witnessed the surrender of Japan, have passed away. Of those still alive, the youngest of them is 93, and the oldest is 107. More than 70 years later, there was no longer any killing. The war has certainly had a huge impact on their lives. The last words they spoke and their thoughts are the messages I hope to present and convey through this project. where these works must appear, rather than where they could appear. They were born here. They defended their homeland to the death when they were young, and they saw peace here in the twilight of their lives. The Huaihua area, the last war of the Japanese invasion of China. The Japanese surrender paper was signed here, and the office where it was signed has been preserved intact to this day. So I choose this surrender office as my exhibition space. The audience I hope to get is not only limited to a certain region, especially under the influence of the pandemic. The meaning of the exhibition is redefined, and the use of the VR technology is constantly challenging the boundaries between people. So I use virtual reality technology to recreate the space, allowing viewers to access the office from anywhere in the world by clicking on the links and the different hotspots, learn about the stories of the different veterans and the history. There are still 5 veterans alive in this area, 2 of whom are still able to walk, and I have invited them to come into the space, back to this room where the surrender ceremony took place. One of the veterans was unable to travel due to the cold weather, and another, Wu Tinghai, accompanied by his family, came to the exhibition, and he became the only guest at the exhibition. In this process, the boundaries of the subject of the viewer has been challenged so that the audience from different regions and time zones can be placed in the exhibition space through virtual reality. They can learn about the history and the stories of the lives behind the wall. I hope to get more comments and feedback from you. Please feel free to leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to your opinion, which will help me to make it better. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Ling.
I am Kate Collyer. I'm speaking from the Hudson Valley of New York in the United States. I am a part-time PhD candidate, and as of the start of the semester, this is the beginning of my second of 6 years of research here with the Burren College of Art. This brief presentation will show the work that is exhibited in Hedges, as well as introduce the work that preceded them in the last year. This map is part of the foundation for my research. What is shown is the central Penjayan mountain range. While we were all one landmass millions of years ago, this tether in our current time has become the International Appalachian Trail, a trail that extends through the eastern United States and Canada, with portions in Greenland and Iceland, as well as bisecting Ireland, Scotland, and finishing along the northern coast of Norway. As part of Hedges, I have 2 pieces, a wall-mounted print-based installation and a series of glass booklets. On Trail is a collection of silkscreen prints on mulberry paper with screen-printed glass trail markers. Within this first year of my research, this work is leading into interactive and participatory iterations of themselves. They take on from my collective experience in the areas that make up the International Appalachian Trail while focusing on material research. In thinking about this particular trail, long ventures like this are venerated. One could perhaps even consider as a form of pilgrimage. Wayfaring, the act of traveling by foot, connects us to our environment and subsequently those that walk the same paths. Environment is interconnected, strung together by walked trails, documented on page, then retold in works of art. On Trail is reference, quite literally, to these pathways and their travels. Materiality has been particularly important. Beyond having a unified body of work in palette and texture, it has been a focus to connect materials that I'm using back to the landscape. In this sense, glass being equatable to sand, paper to trees, ceramics to soil. Each of these mediums also give way to different movement and sound when touched and interacted with, much like the ground we walk on. With such preciousness tied to the act of walking in these areas, there was an immediate connection to the visuals and constructions that would highlight this. Book arts as relics, keepers of knowledge, repositories for shared experience is where I landed. In a place where time does not exist as a fan deck structure, it was created as a result of finding bamboo manuscript images and acknowledging the current use of fan decks for paint swatches. When you fully open this book, it is a cyclical landscape. With each page, you could consider this as walking through this place down a path. Again, an instance where the experience of viewing and interacting with these works is a direct tie to the act of foot travel and trail. In my research, I speak about where stories end and works of art begin. This piece could be considered the visual to that prompt. The landscape here is from time I spent in southeastern Greenland, and though short, again equipped from my travel writings as title and cover. This piece is constructed completely of glass. The pages are held together with a glass rod, which is capped by 2 glass buttons. The covers are sheet glass, while the pages are extra thin screen-printed sheets I pulled with black enamel. I tend to gravitate towards black and white image in my work. Confluence is another completely glass piece. It is a 2-sided flag book, which I came across in the book Art of the Fold and then engineered. The landscape highlighted here is on Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia. At this point, a river meets the sea. One side of this piece shows the sea, the waves crashing against shore. The glass tabs are a gradient of pure white to crystal clear, the image repeated. The reverse showing the mouth of the river, calm and vegetated. The confluence of these waterways is agitated and choppy, both fighting against one another. The overhead view of this piece, I believe, shows this movement. When thinking about the qualities of glass, their hardness, delicacy, I also start to think about books that perhaps won't open or turn unless the glass were to be broken and mishandled. That its beauty is maintained because of the reverence one has for its preservation, utilizing the quality of the glass as metaphor for land itself. This piece, titled "Is This What You Came For?" shows an image of the Silfra Fissure in Iceland, the location of where the continental plates on the map I showed earlier are still separating. The text is from my travel journal, which I wrote at the time of this trip. I feel that the use of my own script is important in that there are they are excerpts from a journal, and that these are trail writings, which, as this research progresses, will become even more of a focus. Throughout all of the pieces I have shown thus far, including the 2 that are exhibited in Hedges, my personal trail notes and script can be found. Unbeknownst to me at the time of many of my past exhibitions, I was on the International Appalachian Trail and in the areas that make up the central Pangaean mountain range. This has allowed me to explore this research visually, making work that is connected to my field of inquiry, while I'm developing projects that open to a larger community for both source material and finished work interactions. The book Art's Installation Suspension is composed of multiple glass booklets. Each is made screen-printed glass, cyanotype prints, and pen and ink on Gampi silk tissue and are hand-bound. These objects can stand alone, but to see them move or interact with them gives them life. My focus on using glass as a main material in this body of work was done not solely for its prior non-use in book arts, but also for its materiality is a direct metaphor to the landscapes themselves. We have a feeling or sense when glass is scraped or clinked together. We instinctually handle glass tentatively. Its preciousness leads to interactions that are more reverent and cautious. There is a respect for the material, not only for its delicacy and fragility, but also its capabilities to possibly harm you. The current iteration of my research question is, while conceptually using the landscapes composing of the International Appalachian Trail, can works made of glass, paper, and ceramic become interactive models for the relationship we should have with our natural environment, generating new ways to foster community? It is within these characteristics of glass that this mimicry of this human landscape relationship is born. This endeavor to model a way to interact with landscape and how artwork is experienced is reinforced with the narrative that is shared. Martin Shaw states that to attend to depth without communicable art forms is the difference between drowning and swimming. We reside in the liminal space between consequences of our actions and the legacy that we leave to the following generations. story and written experience continue to be utilized to process pieces of our worldview. These tools and network in visual form achieve similar understandings within larger communities. As a printmaker by education and practice, I also find the historical importance of print making it possible to share visuals that were once only available to a select few, a reason this medium remains foundational to my practice. This innate accessibility is why print is integral to my research. Print's pathways and the written word are all enhanced by experience and reiteration. Below my feet, a tangible story, and Where Earth Meets Sky, while not made with glass or direct book art structures, pays homage to their protective quality and repetitive nature. The multiple here, a direct link to the use of print within my body of work and the repeated footfalls one takes when on trail. These pieces also are the beginning of the use of vessels directly in finished work, an idea that is being worked on into new pieces. Here, the glass vessel acting as a barrier or a shield. A recent solo exhibition of my work here in the United States focused on my walking through these landscapes, with an iteration of On Trail and the works from the previous year. While there are works that are focused more on traditional printmaking, they are hung as a pathway, leading the viewer from one end of my experiences on the International Appalachian Trail to the other. My intention is to not fully remove my own narratives from this research, but to allow it to be enveloped within a larger case study of wayfaring in these areas. In ultimately gathering responses to place, this research will unearth commonalities in experience and landscape along the International Appalachian Trail, connecting northern North America, Nordic countries, and Ireland. Within the confluence of experience, art, and interaction, visuals generate stewardship and foster a connectedness among individuals in these shared environments. Quote, celebrating a grandeur of a common landscape, according to the International Appalachian Trail. I would like to make a quick thank you note to fellow PhD candidate Katerina for taking some time to photograph my work in the exhibition space, as well as Anya, Eileen, and Adam for its installation, as I was unable to travel there to be in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kate, from all the way from New York. Thank you, Chi from China. Ling, can I just ask you to bring up on the main screen here for us, just to X out of that presentation. And thank you everybody for navigating all of those excellent presentations, both live and remotely. And now we are going to hand over to Dr. L Putnam, who we're going to ask to respond and maybe open a discussion on some of the ideas that have been presented this morning. And then hopefully towards the end of the morning session, we can open the floor then to a Q&A. But for now, let's hand over to Dr. L Putnam. And can we bring Dr. L up on the main screen there while she speaks? Just double click on her. Thank you, Ling.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly, Al. Thank you.
Great, great. Well, I want to thank everybody for such fantastic presentations. This is, it's incredibly rich, and I know I was furiously writing notes and then trying to reflect on the presentations and the connections as I'm doing it. And I just want to go through a list of some of the concepts that came to mind as I was listening to the presentations and thinking about the work. So systems, co-creation, shared milieu, relational, extending beyond the human, different modes of time, connection, playing with systems, relating and challenging. These kinds of entanglements that I saw come out, not just within the work itself, but between all the artists and your research, I thought was very appropriate too for this time of the pandemic, a time of tension where we've been further apart, and yet our connections and entanglements are more explicit through our shared experience of a virus. starting back, or I'll go backwards. So starting with Kate, and just to also say, I come from Albany, New York, so I am familiar with the Hudson Valley region of my home state. And but here, connecting not just to the landscape and the trail and the material of work, but also enabling a thinking of geological time and how we can use art as a means of experiencing geological time. And here, as I've seen with all the projects, this capacity too to test the limits of the medium. There's a great degree of experimentation throughout the work where it's challenging what we use with the medium and seeing how we can work with other media to extend those possibilities. So the idea of creating books with glass, books, something that is so tactile, so tangible, but then to blend that with glass, something fragile, something to look at. It just introduces just a kind of fantastic tension there. But then also the connections made to the earth itself. And here I can also draw connections to the work of Katarina and what you're doing working with permaculture. And so here, and really throughout the various projects, this kind of push away from the human as the center, this way of connecting with other systems, other beings, and using art in this way, this kind of ecosystem that we're part of. Here, the ecological of the plant, but also just the ecological and the interconnections of friendship and how we connect to each other. And that's where this concept of co-creation kept coming up in my mind, where it's not just collaboration, but this idea of creating together. And that brought connections to Joe Hendel's work. So thinking about, creating with technology, and especially with AI, where it's the output is not determined in advance. Computers can be programmed, systems can be informed, but in a way, we give quality of our control to the computer as we work with them to create new work. So this idea too of also working with computers and AI to not just critique masculinity, but perhaps form new modes of masculinity of this post-human. And especially when we think about how in digital studies and digital culture, there has been quite a strong history of considering gender in terms of the feminine and also the non-binary. But to focus on this aspect of masculinity is so important, especially when we think about the prominence of masculinity in presumptions of technology and computer culture. And so appropriating from certain sources like men's groups and the alt-right and commenting with that, but also creating with that. Here too, thinking about cybernetics, thinking about systems. So that brings me then to the work of Ling Liu, where it's going back, and here we get another sense of time, a sense of going back in time, the sense of looking at systems of rhythm, systems that have been passed down generation to generation. And here it's about drawing connections between systems that precede us, aesthetic systems, but connections between the visual and the sonic, and also trying to communicate across cultures. So, and there's connections here that can also be drawn to the work of Chen, also working across generations. It's about challenging these borders of subjectivity, but also looking across history and working with different technologies, considering here painting as a kind of technology, as a way for us to connect to each other and engage with these histories of trauma that exceed us as individuals. And that brings me also to Robbie's work, where here it's painting and how it can be used as a means of engaging with death. Death being one of those themes of art that comes up time immemorial. That death and love are themes that just seem to come up over and over and over again. And as much as we try to understand as much as we are of human beings, and science enables us to, get there is also this aspect of death that escapes us. And how can painting as a medium enable us to engage with that, to engage with this void? And so throughout all of these works and all of these practices, I see a strong urge to connect with others, but these others are also other living beings, non-living beings, connecting through systems, and exploring through art to capture and communicate what we cannot quite put into words. So those are just some of my kind of thoughts that immediately come to mind. And I guess the question I have for all the panelists is, how do you see your work coming together or sitting together at this intersection? Not just in the exhibition, but as you bring your ideas together, what common grounds do you find between your practice?
I'd like to invite Chi and Kate firstly to maybe respond, and then we can bring the panelists who are here live with us today up to the screen to respond as well in turn. Chi and Kate, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think that's why this title is The Hedges, because we found we have connections between each other, and it's all about the boundaries. Yeah, I think, and also the Chinese character, the hedges, that was made by the bamboo, and it's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, Kate.
Yep. Sorry. I definitely agree, particularly with how the title is what's been drawing us all together, especially coming from such a wide array of research foundations. And I think materiality too, and how we're pushing those boundaries. So not only physical boundaries or these connections, but also then these boundaries we're using within medium that that are connecting all of our interests that are so wildly different.
Okay, thank you, Kate and Chi. I'd like to invite now the panelists. Maybe you could just step up towards the screen though to respond. Thank you.
One at a time, or?
Yes.
Okay. I was really drawn to when Ling was talking about the syllables sort of turning into nonsense at the end, and then that sort of limit case where language breaks down. I really felt that, especially sort of coming from a much more text-based art form, theater and music and performance, that yes, and I think and visual art already kind of does that in so many ways if it doesn't have text involved in it. And it's interesting with Kate's work, where the text is written in this sort of very delicate sort of, you want to be very fragile with it there, but you also want to read it as well and sort of come close to it. And so where are those places, to me, just thinking about where are those places on the edge or in the textures of Robbie's paintings, just where are those places that there's something being communicated in sort of the smallest, subtlest, sort of almost most degraded or coming into life material, or with Katarina's plants, they're literally trying to do their plant thing through the roots and everything like that. And at those small little scales, where possibility could really happen, I think that's sort of something that connects us. And hedges is a really good metaphor, because these are they're boundaries, but they're living boundaries, and they move and grow. I think that's something that unites all of our work.
Yeah, I too was sort of drawn to the fact that connection and interconnection is very relevant to most of our practices. And I guess what I was thinking as you were talking is the nature of this program, this PhD program, is pursuing new knowledge and when pursuing new knowledge, you're automatically, critiquing old knowledge, which is like often a binary or something that separates. So whether it's the gender binary, whether it's a separation between culture and nature, whether it's this separation between talking about life and talking about death, I think a lot of our work sort of challenges those separations and tries to connect those themes.
Thank you, Katarina.
I think they said most of the things. For me, like my own work is, at least at this point, it's always like testing, like for me, testing the boundaries of sound, like also testing the limits of the audience, like how harsh this can be for the audience to like get what I want to say. So and with all of our work, and also like as the title of the show, we are all like trying to test things and experiment things and try to find this boundary. Then I think that that is how we kind of find the new knowledge in our projects and our process, I think. Okay, thank you.
I think that, like, regardless of how our different mediums present, like the process of what we do, like the way that research develops in the studio, like inherently like links us in how we think. Like we're breaking things down, we're doing these things repeatedly, we're going through this, like we're problem solving via like our art mediums of sort. And so like, whenever we were discussing our title and we were thinking of boundaries and we were talking about like Irish hedges, I was thinking about like the hedge schools that like taught secret knowledge like under repression, or like sought these like ways to preserve, you know, older traditions or things that weren't being allowed to be taught freely. And so like, I was kind of thinking of it as along the lines of like secret knowledge or discovering like new knowledge through, in my case, through digging through old stuff and like practicing old things in a new way by new people that are educated differently. And so like, I think like the actual process of visual research will like always sort of unite how the PhD work comes together. Like there will always be that link. And so even though it might be very diverse in subject matter and how it presents, it will always have that feel to it generally.
Thank you, Robbie. Back to you, Dr. Putnam.
Thank you. No, this is great. And it just brought up a few other observations, listen to all of you speak about it. And this idea too of hedges as a title, as you've all mentioned, you know, it's a kind of border, it's a boundary, but it's a particular kind of boundary. It's a living being. And one concept that keeps coming to my mind is French philosopher of technology, Gilbert Simondon, describes the milieu as this relational space where we like coexist. And it's this relational space that's not just geographic, but also technological. And here we can think about the technologies of our artistic media and how we create new relations through milieu and this way of kind of living in this entangled space. So the hedge, it's not separate from the places that it demarcates. It's very much part of that landscape. It's part of the scene, but at the same time, it kind of stands apart. It's that tension of the liminal space that all of you have articulated quite well. And it's also present throughout the work. I think another point that comes to my mind is, you know, thinking about their PhD in arts and artistic research about contributing new knowledge. You're not contributing just new knowledge to the production of art. but engaging with incredibly complex questions of life and philosophy. And so there's a very rich interdisciplinary aspect to the work. And art is essential to this exploration. And it's art that tests limits and art that enables us to think differently. And personally, I think that's criteria for good art. So it's really, it's thinking about the capacity and the impact of this work beyond the gallery and the studio, but the significance it brings to the worlds we live in. And I guess that brings me to my next question. I know because you're all kind of in process right now with your work. Is there something this year in your research that surprised you? Something new that you discovered working in the studio that you wouldn't have anticipated a year ago?
Again, I'd just like to invite Chi and Kate to respond first of all, and then we'll open it to the students who are here present with us today in the lecture. Okay, just Chi then. Chi, can we hand over to you and then to the students who are here in the lecture hall?
Yeah, I think I found the VR technology to make my project across different time zone to show to different people. And that's the pandemic forced me to do that. I have to think about how to show my work online in this way, in this particular surrender office. So VR technology helped me to achieve what I want. Yeah. So, and I think that's a very important way, because in this exhibition, actually, I want to use the VR glasses, but I think it's impossible at this moment because of the COVID-19. But I want to make some deep technology research about that to make it happen in a final exhibition. I think that will be the important part in my exhibition in the next stage. Yeah.
A lot of things surprised me. One thing that surprised me was just how many AI images that I collected and just like put in folders. And when I finally sort of got time came around to sort of start to sort of shave them and shape them in Photoshop, I had so many, and I have way more, but also stuff that needs to be processed. And just like, I think one of the things, especially with the AI, is that it sort of becomes addicting and obsessional to be in interaction with like a server in Denmark while I'm generating these images and hoping that the data doesn't, like that the sort of disk doesn't get full, and just constantly being surprised each time I nudge it, and it gives me something completely strange. I think I've also been really surprised by how I like it when it breaks even more. And those surprises, and then to discover sort of in a broken, strange, warped, stretched human form, like real beauty, and that was really a wonderful thing for me to see that, and it's something I'm going to continue with.
I think I talked about this a bit in my project already, or my presentation already, but I was really surprised with the amount of connections that I made this, like the past 4 months or maybe 6 months in my studies, and how people involved at the intersection of art and gardening are very open and sharing, and really wonderful people. And I think that without forming this new network, I wouldn't have been able to get as many materials. I wouldn't be as confident when it comes to growing, and just having these people sort of access to these people who can give me advice or provide me with things, and then in turn I provide them with advice or knowledge or whatever I can. As someone who's pretty introverted and not great at socializing and reaching out to people, I was surprised to sort of discover this about the work and about myself.
I think for me, it was like with my sound work, because I think this is like the first time I actually tried to make the sound work into nonsense, like to be like unpleasant for people to listen to. So this is kind of something I kind of for this year it was a kind of a pretty brave experiment for me. So yeah, I think that's something I'm kind of surprised I did it, and I kind of finished it, and I liked it somehow. So yeah, that's my thing.
I think for myself, I've been like technically there have been some things that I've been messing with, and one of the surprises that I made this year was I figured out how to take marble dust, which is traditionally something you would mix in with white paint in order to make your whites more white or more opaque, which makes them more white. And I started combining it with rabbit skin glue, which created a type of fixotropic primer that I could put onto canvas that created this sort of stone-esque base that I could paint on quite normally. And it makes really thinned out oil paint behave kind of like watercolor. And the way the stone dust like absorbs the paint acts like paper, which is like kind of wild on a lot of different levels. And it's both extremely traditional in its material, but it's not a traditional like application of the material at all, as far as I'm aware. And I think that a sort of like superficial favorite surprise out of it is that it actually allows like certain parts of my paintings to sparkle, which oil paint does, but in an annoying way that it's reflective and then you can't see it anymore. But this is like a very pleasing sort of reflection. And I've been working with combining two sort of historic methods of drawing. Well, one's a little bit more contemporary, but the traditional one is side size, where you paint or draw something exactly at the same size and you go back and forth and your canvas is next to your subject matter, literally next to it. And you spend your time all day going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I've been combining that with a type of comparative drawing method, which is usually what people learn in life drawing, where you've got something far away, you've got your easel, and you can measure out and get things proportioned by comparing things within the subject to create an accurate drawing. I've been kind of bouncing back and forth between the two modes of mimicry, essentially, which has led to a lot of confusion in trying to sort out how to get those two things to sort of work together. I haven't quite sorted it out, but it's been surprising in that it was more difficult to pull off than I thought it would be. Like I always knew that they were sort of like fundamentally different but adjacent things, and to actually get them to work together in a way that's smooth is surprisingly difficult. And I've been using that with the newer paintings that are in progress but shown in the gallery.
Well, what a fascinating question, and what great responses there, answers from the students. It's really interesting to hear about what new discoveries PhD students are coming up with as part of their research. Elle, your questions as well were just so broad-ranging and interesting perspectives on how their works are contextualized as well within philosophy and larger ideas. But I think now we're just coming to the end of the session. We just maybe have 5 or 6 minutes left, and I'd like to maybe open up to the floor. There might be 1 or 2 questions or comments from people who are here today as well that might be interesting to finish up the session with. So is there any questions or comments that anyone would like to make here? Nothing, nothing. And so Kevin, are you have something?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how you want the word. And it's for Joe. And it's kind of a two-pronged question, so maybe not.
Well, maybe one, yeah, just ask one question and I'll have to relay it here to Zoom as well.
But I was curious about your use of posting in relationship to masculinity as it predominantly, when it was originally sort of concocted, was this response to like the liberal human subject, which is essentially male, and this reliance on like neo-Platonic thought with like man as the essence of being and man as the dominant subject. And so I was wondering if bringing that into posthumanism in like that sort of pragmatic lens, do you paradoxically end up replacing the sort of gender neutral position that posthumanism had by then again making the subject male even in the lens of your.
Just let me relay just a very brief overview of that question. The question covered issues of posthumanism and the male gendered body. So it's a little bit more complex than that, but I'll let Joe, if you stand up, maybe you can respond to it in more detail.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really interesting question. It's a really interesting question, right? Because the original push, like the sort of the post-human need was to get away from able-bodied white male as normative, nominal subject, and everyone else sort of kind of gets to participate a little bit. And so a lot of the, you know, the Haraway, her cyborg manifesto is about cyborg feminism. And I think that while also maintaining the male subject, this sort of normative male subject, as the sort of other pole of the binary, in which like this is the top of the hegemony, and all the others who are underneath are now finally going to express ourselves. I think ultimately that project it's not nearly complete, but if we look around the world, the amount, the sheer power of what Eric Anderson, the masculinity theorist, talks about as orthodox masculinity. The sheer power of that is actually significantly weakened. And so the position of the dominant white male, it's not like the problem's gone away, but also like there has to be room for people with those types of with those bodies to find subjectivities which isn't purely in the sort of the old dominant class, because that just ends up actually reinforcing a lot of the push to the right wing that we're seeing in the world today, and sort of people really re-entrenching. It's like, oh, you don't like me, then I'll be even worse. And so like part of the android idea is that this is a decentralized subject, as opposed to the normative in the binary. It doesn't want to participate in the binary, but it rather expresses its masculinity in socially integrated ways, which doesn't see itself as in a post-human way, it does not see itself as having this sort of originary myth. There's no Adam in the garden. And that's my take on it. But I appreciate that it's complex and sort of participating in conversations, in legitimate political conversations and actions on the margins of how people treat each other and everything like that make it tricky. So thank you for the question.
Thanks to both Kevin and Joe. Fascinating topic, deserves a lot more research and exploration in the coming time. Any other last questions, or will I hand over to Dr. L Putnam for some concluding remarks? I think we're handing over to you, Dr. L Putnam, for just to make some concluding remarks and bring the session to a close.
I mean, no, I don't know what else I can really say, but congratulations to everyone. This has been quite a provocative morning, and I'm very excited about all the work that you're doing, and really this, and I guess even here, this idea of a decentralized subjectivity. It's you know, we're getting away from that kind of single autonomous human, but really thinking about how we're enmeshed in this world with each other. And no, it was quite enjoyable and quite powerful. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciated all your contributions and all the work that you've put in to everything. It really shows. So well done.
Thank you everybody for joining us today here in the lecture hall at the Burren College of Art, and also via Zoom from all over the world. And I'd like to especially thank my colleagues, Dr. Lisa Newman, Robert, and Ling Liu for helping with the technology today, which was challenging. So thank you all for taking part.
Everybody.